Good morning and welcome to City Club Missoula's April Forum, our annual State of the Community, which we are recording. My name is Brett Rosenberg and I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the City Club Board of Directors, and I am delighted to see so many people joining us today virtually. City Club's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire them on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, and when we often discuss very controversial issues, it behooves us to keep everything just very polite. Before I introduce our moderator, some thank yous are in order. As always, thanks to the University of Montana and Alex Karklins for keeping the Zoom train rolling and for making these virtual forums possible. Also, thanks to the Missoula Community Access Television, which tapes our forums as part of the media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. You can also find videos of past City Club Missoula forums by clicking on the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. Thanks to our sponsors, including our executive level sponsors. In addition to the university, those are Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. We also like to highlight some other sponsors every month. So today we want to recognize the law firm Boone Carlberg, the City of Missoula, and the Missoula Housing Authority. We're grateful to our very diverse sponsors, and we invite you to join them by going to our website, cityclubmissoula.com. And of course, thanks to our board of directors and our administrator, Eric Legbold. City Club Missoula would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, some of whom are present with us today at our forum. Today, we honor the path they have always shown us in caring for this place and for the generations to come. Today's panel will be moderated by Jill Valley. Jill is the assistant news director and anchor at KPAX, where she started in 1992. She grew up in Spokane and graduated from Washington State University with a degree in communications. Jill has been honored as Montana Broadcaster of the Year 7 times and has received similar awards for writing, feature reporting, and hard news. Jill will introduce our panel, and I will see you all at the break once the panelists have finished their presentations, and you'll then have the opportunity to ask panelists questions. Over to you, Jill.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much. So excited to be here. I love City Club. It's called, this discussion we're having, Missoula Renewed, Life on the Other Side of the Pandemic. I sure hope that that is where we are heading, because it has been quite a year. And I think that it has challenged every aspect of our lives. It has impacted all of us in so many different ways, financially, physically, emotionally. I know we're exhausted over some things that we have to do. I know we're worried about our kids, but you know, somebody said this at the beginning of the pandemic, and I still think it's true. You know, we're not all in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm, and still hoping that we are now emerging from this. But, you know, of course, it's going to take a community to kind of regroup after all we've experienced. So we're going to talk all about that today, and it's exciting because we've got some fantastic panelists for us, and I'm going to introduce them, and then after that, they'll have 10 minutes to kind of give their thoughts, and then we'll take Q&A from all of you out there watching on this virtual event. So our first panelist is Dave Strohmaier. Excited to have him here. He and his wife Gretchen have called Missoula home since 1997. He currently serves as the chair of the county commissioners. He is also on the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee. He's been a city council member. He also worked for 18 years with the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service, 13 years in the private sector as a public historian, specializing in environmental and Native American history. He has degrees from, Seattle Pacific, Yale, University of Montana, and is the author of several books. So we are excited to have Dave here with us. And we'll be hearing from him in just a few minutes. Also, Seth Bodner, of course, we know him to be the president of the University of Montana. In fact, the 19th president. Before he came to join us here in Missoula, he was a senior executive at GE. He also served as the faculty at West Point, where he taught economics. Graduated first in his class from West Point, has the Rhodes and Truman scholarships under his belt, a couple of master's degrees from the University of Oxford, and he served in the 101st Airborne Division, Special Forces, Green Beret. So if stuff goes south for us here today, we know who to call on to get us back under control. And we have Mayor John Engen. He is our 50th mayor. He's been the longest serving mayor. He's a Missoula native. Some of his accomplishments range from comprehensive planning efforts to make sure Missoula is compact and sustainable, taking a real hard look at housing affordability and our environment, working with the University of Montana to work on those issues affecting our community and hoping that everyone has a fair shake to make it happen here in Missoula. Plus, he's a volunteer auctioneer, so maybe he can share with us his cadence later on if we run out of questions. But we're so happy to have all three of you here. And we're going to start with Dave Strohmaier. You have 10 minutes to kind of give us your thoughts as to how Missoula did and what's to come as we emerge from this pandemic.
Well, thanks, Jill, and hello, Missoula County. And also thanks to Mayor Engen and President Bodnar for joining me today in this virtual environment. I want to apologize up front if my voice starts to leave. I am in isolation as we speak, awaiting COVID test results. So I will try to forge on here, and thanks for the opportunity of being able to join you. So as some of you out there have heard me say before and are probably sick of hearing me say it, I want to emphasize that whether you live in the city of Missoula or live outside the city limits, we are all residents of Missoula County, all 2,600 square miles of it. And as we think about the future, let's never forget that the cultural landscape of our county extends back in time to the receding waters of glacial Lake Missoula. Now, put a pin in that just for a second. This past year has challenged our entire community in really profound ways that none of us saw coming. Many of us, probably many of you listening here today, grew up hearing stories from grandparents or parents of living through the Great Depression or World War II, of rationing and collective sacrifice. And while we've experienced moments of national trauma since then, many of those experiences have been from the comfort of our armchairs, lacking the visceral shared experience of the pandemic that we are still in. We've all lived it and breathed it. Over the past year, we've borne witness to injustice and inequity in our society, even right here in Missoula County. We've been separated from loved ones in assisted living facilities, and in some cases, unable to hold their hands until the light has nearly departed from their eyes. None of us, and I want to repeat, absolutely none of us have gone unscathed. COVID-19 in Missoula County has brought out the best of folks. It's also regrettably brought out some of the absolute worst, and there is no way for us to sugarcoat that. As difficult as it is, we've got to hold both of these realities, I believe, simultaneously. We absolutely must root out the callousness, indifference, bigotry, and hate, both personal and systemic, in our community. But let's also take time to recognize and celebrate the selflessness, the beauty, the generosity of so many, all in recognition that life is a fragile gift and that we have a choice to embrace that life and to do so in a spirit of abundance rather than scarcity. Ladies and gentlemen, today on this day in April, I believe the state of our community is strong, but it is oh so fragile. Through it all, I'm optimistic and I'm forever grateful to everyone in our community who stepped up during this past year to care for one another. It's been an absolute joy, and I might add a hell of a lot of fun working with Commissioner Slotnick and Vero, whose energy and optimism and creativity is a daily inspiration to me and many others. To date, Missoula County has spent upwards of $20 million addressing the pandemic and associated impacts. Thanks to our finance department and many others, we've navigated the federal requirements of the CARES Act and FEMA to cover these costs and avoid retrenchment or local taxpayers covering the financial burden. My thanks go out to the entire Missoula County team in responding to the pandemic, to the Office of Emergency Management, City County Health Department, Partnership Health Center, and first responders who've conducted contact tracing, testing, and now vaccinations. The same could be said for all our community partners, from hospitals to nonprofits to businesses to faith communities. And lest we fail to learn from this experience, we've worked with the University of Montana and the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula and others to launch the Missoula County COVID-19 Documentation Project so that future generations understand our response to the pandemic in real time and aren't having to look back to the year 1918 as examples of how to respond to a similar public health crisis. Our 11 independently elected officials and their departments have really pushed the envelope of creativity during this past year, from our county attorney's office's pretrial diversion program to our county treasurer's office's ISAM and Map Missoula electronic tools. Our IT staff supported remote work for upwards of 1,000 users across Missoula County, and the list goes on. We even pulled off a major federal election during these unprecedented circumstances. Faced with the reality that traditional shelters couldn't operate at full capacity, we're proud to have partnered with the United Way and Hope Rescue Mission to stand up the temporary safe outdoor space, a success story that many thought was impossible. Housing obviously remains an acute challenge for our community, which is why we've hired a housing coordinator and initiated the process to develop a housing plan for the county. Our planning and grant staff have been doing double duty, pivoting from their pre-COVID work plan to spin up an emergency rental assistance program, relief fund, and small business job retention fund. And then there's the Swatup-Kane Neighborhoods Master Plan and Build Grant implementation, updating our zoning code, launching a food policy advisory board, planning for the future of parks and open space, and figuring out how to coexist with fire on the landscape. Climate change has not abated, and neither has our commitment as Missoula County to mitigate and adapt to this global crisis and emergency through our 100% clean electricity goal, the Climate Ready Missoula Plan, and solarizing county facilities. Because we didn't just hit the pause button during the pandemic, we're now ready to hit the accelerator as we round this bend. I can't wait to see you later this year at our rejuvenated fairgrounds, the groundbreaking of the Rocky Mountain Exploration Center, where rumor has it Jerry Marks will be beginning his second 50-year tour of duty with Missoula County, and the opening of our flagship public library. Finally, we believe that at least part of the light at the end of this pandemic tunnel might very well be, and you guessed it, a passenger train. Last year, Missoula County spearheaded an effort to establish the first passenger rail authority in state history, which came to fruition in November when 12 counties from Sanders to Webo executed a joint resolution to establish the authority. The bigger story, though, I believe, extends well beyond rail. Namely, it's still possible to bridge the urban-rural, east-west, blue-red, and ideological divides that have split this state and nation apart. Now, back to that thing I put a pin in earlier. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion must be at the center of everything we do in this county. Yet it's an aspiration we have yet to fully realize. We've created a new community justice department, and I'm excited to say that earlier this year, we hired our first diversity coordinator, Jamar Galbraith. With the help of our county auditor, we're reevaluating how even bone-dry procurement policies, of all things, can be enlivened to address equity. Before I wrap up, I'd like to share just a short 1-minute video produced by Sarah Bell with our communications team, focusing on our strong collaboration with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and remembering that this place has a rich and deep heritage that it carries into the future and extends back into deep time. Alex, is that something you could spin up for us?
Missoula County acknowledges that this event takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people.
relationship with the tribes.
Well, thanks, Alex. And I would just end by saying gratitude and thankfulness is something that is the take-home message for me on this day and so many days over the past year. So in that spirit of gratitude and thanks, I really want to recognize at this time the many years of service that Ellen Leahy has provided to the City County Health Department, and also welcome to Shane Barnett as he assumes the health director role shortly. The challenge, I think, before us as we move forward is, what have we learned? What will we remember out of this experience of the pandemic? And how can we become more resilient and caring as a community into the future? Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dave. Fingers crossed that you have a negative test result in the COVID. I'm not sure if any of us are going to escape that inevitability. All right. Thank you for your thoughts. Next up, we have Seth Bodner, again, the president of the University of Montana. He has 10 minutes to give us his thoughts on the past year.
Thanks, Jill, and thanks everybody for joining today. Of course, I want to thank Commissioner Stromeier and Mayor Engen. It's always great to see them and see all of you. This is one of my favorite events of the year, and I can't wait to see you all in person together at the 2022 State of the Community meeting. So, as Commissioner Strohmaier mentioned, I think it would be putting it mildly to say this past year has been a difficult one for all of us. In fact, I've shared that this has been no doubt the most challenging period in my life as a leader. That includes deployments to combat zones where you're getting shot at. There's simply no playbook out there for running a university or a community, for that matter, in the midst of a pandemic. And every day has brought new and unexpected challenges. But while this has been a difficult time, it's also been the most inspiring time in my career. Over the past year, I've been amazed, I've been humbled by how our faculty, our staff, how our students have risen to tackle the challenges of this pandemic. And I'm so proud of the way our family has stepped up in a spirit of partnership with our community. From our amazing faculty in our School of Public and Community Health Sciences and their close collaboration with public health officials. I want to add my congratulations and thanks to Ellen Leahy and her team, as well as at the state level, and to our researchers in UM's Genomics Corps and the thousands of COVID-19 tests they've processed from around the state. In fact, the UM lab continues to be one of the only labs identifying and analyzing new COVID-19 variants in our state. And of course, our incredible and energetic pharmacy team. To date, UM's partnered with Missoula City County Health to administer over 13,000 COVID-19 vaccinations in our community, and we'll be administering thousands more over the weeks ahead. And that lending hand, of course, has been reciprocated, and we are so grateful for the way that the entire Missoula community has frankly been there to help our students and our university when we've needed it most, and for that we are deeply, deeply grateful. Now, the theme of this year's State of the Community, I think, is really appropriate: Missoula Renewed. If you look up the word renewal, you can see multiple definitions, and one of them says, quote, replacing something that is worn out, run down, or broken. Now, if we're being honest, there are some who've associated maybe some of those terms with U of M over the past decade, and I understand that. But the word renewal also means the action of extending a period of validity. And I know that everyone here today shares a commitment to protect what is not just valid, but vital. And that is access to a robust, high quality public education for the sons and daughters of Montana for decades to come. So, over the past year, as we've been dealing with the monumental challenges that this pandemic has presented, as Commissioner Strohmaier said, we haven't hit pause on our strategic thinking. We've also been, spending a lot of time thinking about what our institution needs to look like on the other side of all this. In fact, last May, I tasked a 20-member committee, created what we called a university to design team. And their job was to research national trends and look at the emerging landscape of higher education. And the question at the heart of this work was simple. What do future students in our community need from UM? What should a flagship of the future look like? So they spent the better part of the pandemic quietly, poring over research, articles, consulting experts about what a modern university should look like and what future students will demand from us. Now, as we conducted this research, we learned that UM already fits the bill in many ways. Faculty expertise, a beautiful campus, a vibrant student experience and community. But as we consider the world our students are entering upon graduation, we recognize it's dynamic, it's complex, and if the last year's taught us anything, it's showed us that the world changes quickly. So the question becomes for us, how do we prepare our students to succeed? Of course, in their first job right out of school, but also to ensure that they're well equipped to adapt, to innovate, to succeed in that fifth or sixth job out of school, perhaps in that proverbial job that doesn't even exist yet today. And the good news is that employers and our society are actually calling even more strongly today for students who are equipped with the knowledge and competencies that are really the hallmarks of a UM education. Critical thinking, problem solving, communication, teamwork, innovation. And so we're working to build upon that strength, while also taking steps at the same time to expand experiential and work-based learning opportunities. So our students have the specific skills and experiences that are in demand from employers right now. So actually, over the past year, we recently launched a new initiative called Elevate U that is intended to do just that. And the goal is to ensure that every single student at UM across every major has significant, starting from day one, when they join us at orientation, significant career readiness training, internships, opportunities to earn industry recognized credentials, networking help, resume help, and that's built into their UM education. And that also means expanding community partnerships with local employers. A great example is our partnership with local company ATG. And to date, we've talked about this program in the past, but more than 100 graduates are employed with ATG after enrolling in a 12-week training program taught in partnership with this fantastic local tech company. Now, historically in higher ed, there's been a heated debate about what's most important, career-specific training or a broad-based liberal arts education. Now, we see that actually as a false dichotomy. We believe that our students need to be both broadly educated and specifically skilled. And I'm confident that as we move forward, this is something that's going to set UM apart from other universities. UM graduates are going to have both the job-specific skills employers are looking for today and the core foundational competencies needed to live a fulfilling life in a rapidly changing world. And that vision for a UM education, one that nurtures in our students broad capabilities and the ability to adapt, paired together with career-specific skills, it's a message that's resonating. We're actually seeing tremendous student interest from prospective students in Montana and across the country. In fact, the number of students who've applied and been admitted to our 4-year campus for next fall is up, around 50% versus previous years. Now, there's still a lot of uncertainty in the air. As students and families are navigating their college decision during a pandemic, they can't visit campuses, and we don't know how they're going to make these decisions. But so we don't know what the fall's entering class will look like. But what we do know is that we're really excited about this growth in student interest that we're seeing in our university this spring. Now, any process of renewal involves change, and that always comes with difficult decisions. And as a public institution that's funded by taxpayers and our students' precious tuition dollars, a key responsibility for us is to assess and adapt how we allocate our resources. And so many of you are likely aware we're currently working on that at U of M. And as we do so, the top priority is our students' needs. That is our responsibility as the stewards of this institution. So, we've been doing some preliminary budget planning for the years ahead, and we're taking into account the trends of the past decade and changes we've seen in the areas of study that students are choosing, both here at UM and nationally. And I want to emphasize an important point, because this is primarily a process of determining how best to allocate our existing resources. It's not a process of reducing resources. In fact, our overall academic budget is staying roughly constant, within a few percentage points as we move forward. But changing student trends do require that we make some adjustments in terms of how resources are allocated across the various colleges and schools within UM. So as we move forward, some colleges will see increased budgets, while others will see some decreases. And that approach to resource allocation, it's a new one here, and it will admittedly require some difficult decisions, but it also allows us to preserve and enhance our rich disciplines in the fields of humanities and the arts, while also making sure that colleges they're seeing nearly 100% growth in applications in areas like forestry, environmental sciences, health, and business, that they're able to meet the rapidly growing demands from our students as well. So as we pursue this important academic renewal at UM, many have also seen we're also undertaking the most ambitious renewal of our physical infrastructure that UM has seen in generations. Over the coming years, we'll invest around $100 million to update student-facing infrastructure on our campus. Now, these are resources we secured just prior to the pandemic by refinancing our debt and issuing bonds that are specifically for infrastructure improvement only. And later this year, we'll break ground on a new dining facility positioned right on the Oval. The state-of-the-art place will be a hub for students to eat, but also study and socialize in a setting that enhances the beauty of our campus. Some of you maybe know that we recently completed renovations of Panzer Residence Hall, key classrooms on campus, and we'll soon begin major renovations to Knowles Residence Halls, as well as Residence Hall, and upgrade the Ryman Walk, well as extend Memorial Row to connect with the footbridge right down there by the river. And frankly, at the northern end of Memorial Row will be a beautiful new home for the Montana Museum of Art and Culture. It'll be open to both students and the community, right on that border between campus and community. And it was made possible by the generosity of Terry and Pat Payne, and as well as other generous community leaders. And then some of you may know that among the really important infrastructure upgrades, we're also currently working with the legislature to construct a new building for our world-renowned College of Forestry and Conservation. Building is going to be constructed almost entirely out of Montana timber, a cutting edge and environmentally friendly material called cross-laminated timber. And this will provide our fastest growing college the added classroom and lab space needed to keep up with the demand from really around the entire world for the offerings like our #1 wildlife biology program, ecosystem and conservation sciences, forest management, just tremendous programs in that college. So a lot going on. And while this has been a difficult year for all of us, it has also been a really inspiring one. And the renewal taking place at UM, I think, should provide the Missoula community, our amazing alumni base, and as well as future Grizzlies, with a rekindled hope that our best days are, in fact, ahead of us. In that spirit of renewal, I want to ask everyone that's joining us today to, renew your commitment to this university in heart and in practice. The work of transformation is difficult, and the task was never promised as an easy route with full consensus or always glowing reviews. In fact, most days it's the opposite of that. But my job, like Mayor Engen's and Commissioner Stromeier, isn't necessarily to get everyone to agree with me, no matter how hard that may be. But my job is to ensure the University of Montana, and I think all of our jobs, is to ensure that the University of Montana renews itself as a flagship of the future, and then we're brave enough to steer that transformation. So I, of course, have every faith that we can and that we will, and I am deeply grateful for your partnership with us on this journey.
Thank you so much, Seth. Exciting things happening on the UM campus and beyond. All right, let's hear from Mayor Engen. You have 10 minutes to kind of give us your thoughts on the past year, such as
Thank you very much, Jill. I appreciate that. Thanks to City Club, the many sponsors, to Commissioner Strohmaier and President Bodnar. I'm grateful to spend some time with you this afternoon to talk a little bit about the past, what's afoot today, and what I think the future holds. And I think it's important that we acknowledge last year in just human terms. There has been tremendous pain and suffering in our community, in the state, nation, and around the world, to the point that we could likely be dismayed and despondent and lack the energy or commitment to move forward. And in fact, what I've seen is that through the course of the pandemic, despite the chaos and bedlam and anger and spleen, there have been tale after tale of heroicism, for lack of a better term of art. People standing up and stepping out, putting themselves at risk so that others might be safe, and doing so relentlessly over and over again. What I've seen among our team here at the City of Missoula and throughout local government and the institutions that we rely on every day to do the right thing is that they have done the right things over and over again. And they have done them quickly and with courage. We're in the business and government of generally going pretty slowly, but during the course of the pandemic, we shifted gears really rapidly to ensure that we were taking care of whatever the emergency of the day was. So we tipped up a team of local leaders who met twice a day at the beginning of the pandemic just to ensure that we were communicating appropriately, that we weren't working at cross purposes, and in fact, that we were moving the community forward and trying to understand in the midst of lots of confusion where we stood and how we might move forward. And I have to congratulate that team and the many folks who participated at all levels in ensuring that we were talking to each other and then implementing plans and procedures that were in place and inventing new plans along the way. So we have certainly not been unscathed here at the City of Missoula or in Missoula County, but we have proven ourselves resilient. And I think we have opportunities moving forward to become even more resilient than we've been. Never waste a good crisis is the famous turn of phrase, I believe, from Rahm Emanuel, and we are certainly not wasting this crisis. Whether it's learning how to conduct public meetings using technology that I'd not heard of prior to last year, to reaching out to community members who we might not otherwise hear from, to ensure that their voices are at the forefront of our conversations. To just solving logistical problems that we've never encountered before in our lives. It's been a remarkable effort, and I am grateful once again to our staff and to our partners for making all of that happen. It has been a rough year. And it wasn't just the pandemic. We had social unrest, we had electoral unrest, political unrest, and we have survived all of that, and I think learned some lessons from it. In some cases underreacted, and in some cases overreacted. But what I believe now is that we are perched on what I will call a Missoula Renaissance. The opportunities before us are remarkable. And for me, they start with the basics. The City of Missoula is in the business of delivering the services every day that people rely on to live their daily lives, to conduct business, to enjoy themselves, to live healthily and productively. And we will continue to deliver those basic services all day long. And that means we emphasize that which we do very well, and we emphasize improving in all of those areas. So I am not a defunder of police, and in fact, my last budget called for an increase in our funding for peace officers, mostly around training, to ensure that our officers, who I believe most Missoulians rely on daily to support a safe community, have the training they need to understand what it is to be a law enforcement officer in 2021. For me, that's de-escalation in critical situations. It's understanding mental illness. It's our ability to respond compassionately in crisis. And we've extended beyond law enforcement through our fire department, through our partnership with Partnership Health Center to tip up a mobile crisis unit, recognizing that not only in the pandemic, but pre and post pandemic, there are folks with mental health issues that are going untreated. They're falling through the cracks. And more we're recognizing that the federal government has stepped away from that, as has the state. And local governments are having to create the infrastructure around that social safety net. And providing those services that once were the domain of those other government entities. More and more, we believe that we have to step up and create infrastructure that has never been our bailiwick before. So we're, as someone once said, we're flying the plane while assembling it, and it requires lots of flexibility and creativity. But we're getting there, and in the process, we're making lives better. I also believe that we need to maintain our transportation systems, that we need to ensure that when someone calls 911, a trained, highly qualified fire department will respond with emergency medical assistance, or in the case of a fire, they're going to know how to put out the blaze, and they're going to have the equipment to do that. We need to make sure that our park systems, which so many people rely on, and people relied on more so during the course of the pandemic, are in good shape and adequate to meet the needs of a community that is relentlessly hungry for outdoor activities and recreation. We will continue all of those investments in the basic services that the City of Missoula provides, but we're going to do more in the future. We have an opportunity, thanks to President Biden and the Congress of the United States, and I'd like to give a particular shout out to Senator Tester, who supported the American Rescue Plan, which is helping both the city and the county and countless other institutions who take care of our communities every day, not only keep the lights on, but do more. The City of Missoula has about $14.1 million in rescue plan assistance that is coming directly to us. And we believe that that allows us to do a number of things. Not only will it allow us to hold property taxes flat moving forward over the course of the next couple of years, which I think gives relief to many, but it also allows us to provide support and offer innovative programs around, again, that mental health crisis response, homelessness, and addressing the housing crisis. And the housing crisis does not just affect folks today who are unhoused. It affects young people who are just starting out, who would like to build some equity in a home. It affects workers who are having trouble making ends meet, finding a rental unit that is somewhere approximate to their place of business. It affects employers who are hiring those souls. It affects companies who want to bring business here and provide great employment opportunities. It affects the University of Montana, and so much. So housing continues to be likely the highest priority of the City of Missoula. And we have been in the business of addressing the housing crisis now. Certainly during the course of my tenure here in this office, but really pretty dramatically over the course of the last 5 years. We have a housing policy in place that is thoughtful and cutting edge. Last year, we created a housing trust fund to ensure that we're in a position to really begin to address the housing shortage from soup to nuts. And it really is a function of inventory. We're investing in land so that we can partner with the private sector and the nonprofit sector to produce more housing that is affordable and decent. And in doing so, we believe that we can continue to maintain Missoula as a great place to live. A lot of people want to live in Missoula, Montana, and there's a reason for that. It is a place where people can still have a sense of place. They have all of the amenities that are available in a metro area, but we still have a little bit of a small town vibe here, and that delicate balance is something that we work relentlessly to maintain. So our hope here is that not only through the funds provided by the rescue plan, but really through these partnerships. When Commissioner Stromeier says that the City of Missoula is part of Missoula County, it is enormously refreshing. And that partnership that we have with Missoula County is as strong as it's ever been. And the acknowledgement that we are working together and in this together is a big deal and a change. And between the two of us, along with our friends at the University of Montana and other institutions, I believe that Missoula is poised to be a remarkable place to live for everyone. And I will emphasize everyone. That question of equity is critical, and it's something that's certainly been in our plans for a long time, but I think we're redoubling our efforts around ensuring, again, from soup to nuts, that we are addressing inequity in our community and ensuring that the place is the greatest place it can be for the most people. And I must be at about time, Jill.
I think so. Could you see me kind of, getting all twittery? Just kidding. All right, I'm going to ask my first question, and it could be for the mayor or Dave Stromeier. I think a lot of people learned a lot about our health department and the city's power and Ellen's power and the whole board, what they can do in a pandemic. And now the legislature is taking a look at a bill to change that, to maybe erode some of their automatic power. What's your reaction to that? Is that a good idea? Or I know you've probably heard from a lot of different people curious as to how these mandates and these directives could just be unilaterally applied to a certain county. And I think that's kind of where this legislation came from, people frustrated with that. But what are your thoughts if that passes?
I'm happy to start, and I will say that we're in the business of continuous improvement, right? And so there is little that we do in local government that is perfect, and we're always trying to strike something closer to that notion of perfection. Public health is a serious matter, and we've seen how serious it is over the course of the last year. And we've also seen that it can be highly politicized for all sorts of reasons, some of which I think are ridiculous and nefarious. What we have tried to do here through communication really early on is ensure that the power vested in the health department through statute is also tempered by communication and conversations with elected officials. So between Dave's colleagues, Seth and his colleagues at the University of Montana, and other community leaders who began communication early on in this pandemic, those decisions from the health department did not happen in a vacuum. They were largely collaborative. Those decisions were based on both scientific fact and evidence that was before us at the time, as well as a sense of community need and the idiosyncrasies of a place like Missoula. And so we were in the business of trying to strike that balance. Fundamentally, I think that elected officials are ultimately accountable. And to the degree that accountability is built into statute, is built into the way the health departments are governed and decisions are made, is appropriate. I don't know that it's necessarily broken, but I do know that Commissioner Stromeier and I are very interested, as are his colleagues, in having a look at the interlocal agreement that between the city and the county that governs the health department. That agreement's pushing 40 years old. I think it is definitely time to dust that off and ensure that the accountability that I believe our residents are looking for and that elected officials are looking for is there. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we have professional staff, professional judgment, and we need to rely on that professional judgment and those facts in making decisions. So I can tell you that I don't want to be health director, and I don't want Dave Stromeier to be health director. But I do want us to work collaboratively, and I think we're on the right path to do that.
Yeah, the only thing that only two things I would add is first off, the legislature is going to do what the legislature is going to do, and we will try to respond accordingly. And also in moving forward into the future, as the mayor said, we do have a very old interlocal agreement, and we will be taking a hard look at that in the context of whatever legislation comes out of Helena. The second piece is, and this goes to the mayor's point of it probably not being a good idea that either he nor I nor any of our other elected colleagues serve in the role of health director. I absolutely don't think that the public wants us to be having to convene every time there's a public health emergency, such as maybe a sewage spill in a restaurant or whatnot, and having to make a decision on immediate action. And so from that standpoint, it makes a whole lot of sense to retain some level of authority with the health director, with the health board, to be nimble enough to respond to those emergency situations and emerging situations that require fairly speedy and quick action. And so that's something that we push back on with the legislature is if you're going to be throwing some water, don't throw the entire baby out with the bathwater here. Let's be more surgical than that.
Okay. I don't know if President Bodner had any thoughts on that. We do have some questions though from our virtual audience out there that we could ask.
I just want to point out what everyone probably already knows, and that it's now question and answer time. And someday we'll be back to our table talk format, but for now, I'm afraid that we'll have to stick with our Zoom system. We ask that you keep your questions civil and avoid making blanket statements, and use the Q&A function on Zoom. I think everyone is an expert on Zoom by now, and if not, I think we're in deep trouble. And we have some people behind the scenes who will forward the questions as time allows to Jill, who will then ask the appropriate panelists. And I will now disappear myself again. Thanks, everyone.
Just popped up. All right, we do have a question from Russ, and it's for President Bodner. Have you considered implementing the very successful Experience One program at Western on the Missoula campus?
Yeah, thanks, Russ. It's a great question. For those of you who don't know what Experience One is it's basically they call it a block schedule, where rather than taking a whole host of courses, 5 courses, be it a full load for the whole semester, you take one course at a time for 3 weeks. You really focus. It's a great model of learning that works really well for some students. And Western has built upon success seen in that program at Colorado College and some other places. And so the short answer is yes, we have looked at systems like that. It is, and on a program by program basis, it can work. It's a little tough at a large flagship university to revamp the entire schedule like that when you have grad programs and a broad range of activities. But we have looked at ways to really focus in and enable that direct learning. One of the things we really put a larger emphasis on was Summer when I joined back in the middle of 2018, and frankly since then we've actually seen a 30% increase in the number of students taking summer classes at U of M, which does give them time to focus on one course at a time. for a shortened period of time. This year, we actually did a winter session with great reviews from our students and our faculty. And we're looking to see if we can extend that winter session in future years. So we are working to build upon an Experience One-like model, a block schedule model in winter and summer sessions. The regular semesters make it a little bit more difficult, but we are looking at that. And in fact, we do have the former provost of Colorado College that had great success with the block schedule. That former provost is a Missoula native named Dr. Alan Townsend, and he is currently just joined us this past year as the dean of our College of Forestry and Conservation. So we have some great expertise to draw upon there, but really good question and really important one.
Awesome. We have another question from someone who's watching, from Heather. She'd like for you three or two of you, or just to talk about how the different entities are working together to actually meet the growing demand for housing that is affordable. And that's different than affordable housing. You know, if you have a decent job and you have to buy a house that's $350,000, that's not necessarily housing that's affordable. So how is that going to be addressed? I know that's a big part of the mayor, what you've talked about, but when you deal with the city and the county and even the university campus, how's that gonna happen? Because we talk a lot about it, but it's not there yet.
Well, so we're actually in the business of implementing our housing policy, which is as the MBAs say, robust. So our housing policy addresses not only inventory issues for very low income individuals, but really we're emphasizing housing for working families. We will likely through a partnership that we've developed with local development group, what will likely be the largest affordable housing project in the state of Montana, and that's housing for ownership. So that's a function of us doing land banking. That is us acquiring the land to begin with, which is a significant factor in the cost of housing, and then also applying our resources to buy down costs of infrastructure, and then ensuring through those partnerships and through our investment that there is long-term affordability there. This is a model that we believe can be replicated throughout the community. We're currently in the process of reimagining a portion of the West Broadway corridor where the now infamous Sleepy Inn Hotel is. We own, the City of Missoula owns a number of properties there, as well as the Sleepy Inn. And when that facility is no longer necessary for non-congregate shelter, we believe that there are remarkable opportunities, again, for that public-private partnership that really buys down the cost of housing and ensures that housing has some affordability over the long haul. And that's really what goes missing in a market like ours today, is that without sorting inventory and somehow controlling the inflation around housing, we can buy affordability one day and have it go out the door the next. So we're creating tools and programs that allow us to maintain that affordability over time. Missoula County has been a great partner, and now that they have done what I did a number of years ago, and that's hire somebody to actually drive the train here, we expect great things in partnership with Missoula County as well.
Yeah, a few things to add. As the mayor mentioned, we did just bring on a housing coordinator, and we'll be following up and actually are in the process of doing some strategic planning related to housing across the county outside of the city of Missoula. Something else that I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks was the build grant area on the west edge of Missoula, the Swatupkane plan area. This is going to be a growing part of our community and will be a receiving zone for many folks. And I think it's just a super plan that's been put together in terms of mapping out a vision that will include housing types of a variety to embrace our entire community, and not just housing, but also commercial and industrial development. Also, the Trinity project that will be having groundbreaking here in the not too distant future out by our detention facility will provide low-income housing, permanently supportive housing for some of our most vulnerable in the community. And I think the list goes on. We are all about implementing plans and not just creating plans that sit on the shelf. And it is, to use the mayor's analogy, we're building the plane a bit as we are flying it, or the train's being constructed as it's going down the tracks, to use a different analogy. But we are all about thinking as creatively as possible.
You like those trains, don't you, Dave?
I would
So
like to
I'd
say
add to that too. I mean, oh, sorry, John.
I was just going to say the commissioner has a one-track mind.
Oh, there you go. Tip your
I've
server.
been waiting to use that one, I think.
Right?
We, you know, and the university plays a role in this as well, right? We have a large student population that's looking for housing. I mean, we have university apartments that are fantastic. Frankly, some of our on-campus infrastructure is in need of an upgrade, though, and that's what we've been working on. You know, we're not going to be you see some campuses across the country building luxury amenities, lazy rivers, things like that. I've told people you won't see that at U of M. I said, we don't need a lazy river. We have the Clark Fort already. We've got a beautiful campus, but we do need infrastructure, in particular housing and dining options that are up to par. And that's one of the reasons we went out and did this debt restructure. We did a study that showed our campus infrastructure back in 2019 was our age of plant ratio was about 30% older than peer institutions. Some of our dorms had not been updated in decades. Our newest dorm on campus was built in 1992. And so that's Panzer. We did a renovation of Panzer. We'll be focused on Knowles and the other residence halls. Again, not to create luxury per se, but good, safe, affordable housing, which when we do that, it just increases the supply of housing in the community and helps solve those problems. So it's one of the reasons we went out and did that. We saved at a really low interest rate, saved a bunch of money in interest expense, $9 million, as well as freed up capital to invest in this important need for our community.
Seth, sticking with you, I imagine that recruitment is going to be a big deal, since I imagine not as many people were going to college. Everyone's on pause because they weren't sure what was going to go on. Is that, I love the word robust, but I mean, are you pushing that a little bit more to recruit more kids just to kind of recover from what we saw in the last year? Pushing
the return or okay. Yeah. I mean, so yes, last fall was a tough year. In fact, I think the president of the American Council of Education called it a catastrophic year for higher education. We saw nationwide 13% fewer students go from high school to college than in previous years. We saw just this massive exodus, which is obviously a problem financially for universities, but more importantly, those students who take a year off, we all know 1 year turns into 2, turns into 3, and they may never get back on. So we've put a really strong effort. As many of you know, we've been in a multi-year effort to really fix some of our recruiting and admissions infrastructure. 2016 to 2017 to 2018, this university was in an accelerating decline in terms of the number of students who've applied and admitted. Went from, I think, just over 8,000 in 2016 to 7,000 in 2017. By the time we hit 2018, we're down to 6,000. And, we stabilized in 2019, saw growth in 2020 in terms of the number of students who've applied, but we didn't see those students kind of come to college. So what we've done is renewed those efforts. And are seeing good promise in this, but I think people there's still a lot of uncertainty in the air, and so I stopped a tour on campus today, talking to 5 families and their students, and talking about how we're thinking about the fall. How optimistic we are about that return to the in-person learning, the dynamism that makes this campus so special, and the fact that at U of M in the fall of 2021, we're not calling it a return to normal, because if we're doing everything in the fall of 2021 the same way we did it in the fall of 2019, that means we haven't learned anything. We haven't found ways to incorporate technology more effectively into the learning process. And our faculty have been amazing in their ability to adapt, and in ways they're going to incorporate technology with the best of technology with the unique in-person and vibrant campus experience here to return to a normal that is better than we were before.
Thank you. We have another question from an anonymous attendee. How will your public organizations work together to bring new business to Missoula County? Successful businesses help increase individual incomes, which are generally lower here. We know a lot of companies have rebounded. We know a lot of local companies are really struggling in this, but what's the next step in developing a more economically sound Missoula, especially coming out from a pandemic like this?
Well, I can jump in with a couple things. First off, making sure that we retain the quality of life that so many folks find attractive in this region is the baseline, I think. We've seen over the course of the pandemic, this is a very desirable place for many folks to relocate to. So we would be, I think, going in the wrong direction if we sacrificed any of those underlying values that make this such an attractive place to live. Beyond that, so Missoula County has just recently formed a targeted economic development district out by the Y. This is a tax increment finance district, and I will say TIF actually does work and has done great things for the city of Missoula and also Missoula County. We're looking forward to being able to use dollars generated out of that tax increment finance district to plow back into infrastructure in the Y area for existing and future businesses and commercial enterprises. This has been super successful out at the Bodnar Mill site in Bodnar and Milltown. We're seeing Yellowstone, which many folks have probably watched, the TV series Yellowstone, produced right here in Missoula County, out in the Bonner area. And the film industry is taking a hard look at our community. And we have been lobbying at the legislature to make sure that legislation that relates to incentivizing the film industry of doing work here in the state of Montana is adopted. And in our very own development park here in Missoula and Missoula County, there are opportunities to expand that. From a land use standpoint, we are in Missoula County revamping as we speak our very antiquated zoning code, which I think will go a long ways towards offering opportunities for mixed use and really a more modern approach to land use that I think will attract and help support businesses.
And we're working hard within that regulatory framework as well to make it as easy as possible without sacrificing the public good to do business in Missoula. But what we're finding, Jill, is that there's a tremendous bullishness for Missoula, both from folks who have been doing business here for a long time and folks who are looking at the community as a place to relocate. There are a number of examples of businesses that are relocating from even from the Rocky Mountain West because of the quality of life here, because of the nature of the workforce, because of the University of Montana and the education that students there are receiving. I think as we look at the three sort of critical corridors for commerce, if you look at downtown Missoula, there's tremendous activity going on in downtown Missoula today, and I anticipate that will continue. There are both public and private projects, including the reconstruction of the Higgins Avenue Bridge, which goes to quality of life and transportation. I think we'll see a lot of redevelopment along the Russell Street corridor now that transportation project has been completed, and we're seeing some of that already today. And as we look at the Reserve Street corridor, North Reserve, Scott Street, we're going to see a lot of activity there as well. And in some cases, that's a function of public investment in transportation. In some cases, public investment in other infrastructure. And in areas where we both have urban renewal districts, as well as opportunity zone, we're seeing investment interests that I don't think we would otherwise necessarily have seen. And in a world where malls are going belly up, we're going to see a 110,000 square foot Scheels sporting goods store at Southgate Mall, which I think will drive a tremendous amount of audience and activity out there. And they're there in no small part because of the investments we've made in infrastructure along that Brooks corridor between Brooks and Reserve. We, through our economic partnership, of which Missoula County and University of Montana and City of Missoula and many others are members, we just had a conversation at our last board meeting about the nature of the economy from folks largely in the private sector. What lenders are telling us is that the bank vaults are full. That lending is robust and that those folks are bullish. I believe that our entertainment sector, which has been I think key in downtown Missoula in particular, is coming back, as are restaurants and bars. It's been really tough for those folks, but there's a lot of appetite, and provided that we can reopen those facilities safely, I think we'll see a lot of employment and opportunity there as well.
Jill, I just want to jump in. I know Seth probably has some great thoughts, but just to underscore that, the economic vitality and recovery and renewal in Missoula County has everything to do with emerging from the public health crisis. So as folks are thinking that we're seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, let us not let our guard down. And of course, I'm saying this from being in isolation today myself, having who knows what at this point. But if we want to activate our full economy to its potential, and that includes the arts and entertainment industry, we have got to get through this pandemic. So I would encourage everyone to be cognizant of that and aware of that.
You know, I'd just add, look, this is, an exciting time. I mean, the university plays a key role in this. We really see ourselves as we should be, as the human capital development engine for the state of Montana and for the Missoula community in particular. And we typically think of that in terms of, well, the graduates we produce go right into jobs, and that's important. We're continually adapting our curricula and our offerings to meet employer needs for those 2- and 4-year degrees. But we're really expanding in 3 additional ways in terms of how we partner with employers, current employers, and people looking to bring in new jobs. And one of those is through joint training programs. I've mentioned the program we did jointly with ATG. As many of you know, Tom Sturgis. Tom, I spoke in, I believe it was November, maybe late 18, and said, hey, I've got a potentially to grow a bunch of jobs here in Missoula. Can we partner on a training program? And in the span of 3 months, we had a joint training program stood up, and now more than 150 people into jobs that already mostly had college degrees, but needed some retraining, some reskilling, some upskilling, and fueling the growth of that company here in our community. We're doing some others as well. The second area, though, is in creating what we call industry recognized credentials. So if I'm a student studying, name your subject, business, history, economics, that then in addition to my degree, I also can get a certificate in data science, a certificate perhaps in logistics. We're currently working with Wilson Logistics, a great company that has roots here in Missoula, on a certificate in logistics, to add to a student's kind of resume, so that whether I'm a history major or a business major, I can go work in the logistics realm. And then the third area is in partnering with employers. for companies to grow, it's not just about hiring new people. It's about making sure that we're continuing to meet the education needs of current employees as well. And so there's some important partnership efforts that we've launched with employers to really be that education partner, not just to bring new employees in, but to help upskill and help provide new learning for the current employee base to help that company grow even further.
Thank you. So we have another anonymous question, which I thought was pretty interesting too. He asked, the ability to be self-critical or self-reflective is essential to good leadership. What do you think your biggest need is in that area? So I guess I would ask each of you, what do you think you or the city or the county or the school did right? What was a misstep that you do differently in the future? And then what of this pandemic do you think will actually benefit us in the future? And what might we take with us from this experience? We could start with Dave. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, in reverse order there, one of the things that, and of course, we're always looking for silver linings, and in many cases, it would have been much better had we figured out some of these silver linings without the hard experience to come with it. But one of the things we've discovered over the past year is opportunities for enhanced public engagement. So the pandemic has forced us to do things like we are doing right here today, looking at each other through computer screens. And to some extent, that's never going away. We are never going back to how it was a year ago, where we did our meetings in person entirely and did not have this option for public participation via this sort of media. I think that has expanded our ability to reach out to folks who otherwise, with Missoula County in particular, we reach all the way up to Condon, down to Lolo, out to Clinton, and then west to 9 Mile. It's difficult for folks to attend our meetings in person at a convenient time of the day. So to be able to access us via this way and have hybrid meetings, both virtual and in person, I think a lesson that we've learned that is something we will carry into the future. I think we have, even in the course of the pandemic, and I mentioned this earlier in terms of not wanting to hit the pause button, because there is a lot of good work to be done even when we're dealing with crises. And one of those is doing a better job of reaching out to the public, surveying the public of what their hopes and goals and priorities are for Missoula County. So this past year, we did a community-wide survey that asked members of the community those exact questions. And that was one of the first times we've done that as a county. And I think that's something that we've maybe not done as good of a job on in the past as we should have. And we will carry that forward into the future also.
Mayor?
And I very much appreciate Dave's remarks, and that engagement piece holds true for the city of Missoula as well. I think our biggest challenge is communicating everything that is going on, because there is a lot, and anymore we're not only struggling to communicate, but we're also struggling to address misinformation. The old days are gone. It used to be you had your 3 networks and your daily newspaper. Those were the sources of news, and they were largely credible. And to a certain degree, while certainly the Fourth Estate was engaged in its role as a critic on occasion, and shining light on the doings of local government, there is so much information through so much misinformation in many cases through social media, that it's really tough to get the facts out there. And we're not built as a communication machine. And in fact, for a long time, communication for local government was considered a frill. And anymore, it's something that we need to continue to emphasize so that folks know more of what we're doing, that they have credible information as they make decisions, and provide us input around the decisions we make. So emphasizing communication and engagement is a continuing challenge. And today, we have a wonderful communications director who is one person, and we need more than one person in this environment to really make sure that folks are as aware as they need to be.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Bodnar, what we did right, what we did wrong, what will really carry over into the future from our experiences here?
Yeah, I think it's echoes a lot of what both Dave and John have talked about. I think the universities are obviously institutions of learning, but one of the things I think we have to ask ourselves: are we learning organizations? In other words, are we doing well enough at continually asking ourselves, how can we adapt? How can and should we change what we're doing? As we entered this pandemic, I think you have to ask yourself the question coming out of it, does a 300-person lecture really makes even sense to do in person anymore? Or should that be recorded beforehand and then that precious class time used for discussion and interaction? I think we've seen this, this pandemic and the way we had to adapt, force some important, questions about some pretty foundational underlying assumptions, and that is in-person learning is all the time better, right? And I think what we have to say is, and we talked about this before, if we just go back to quote unquote normal in the fall of 2021, and it looks the same as the fall of 19, then we fail. And so we are right now saying, okay, quality is important to us, so is access. And so how can we use technology to improve access, to have that student who's in Great Falls or Colorado, perhaps, be able to continue to learn at the University of Montana? And we're enhancing the number of online offerings that we have, as well as creating more flexible pathways for students, again, and even for that in-residence student. How might our professors and our faculty are working through this right now? How might they leverage technology, again, for what it's best for, perhaps pre-recording lectures with some questions, you can get some feedback, and then utilizing that in-person experience for that direct back and forth, the flipped classroom. So I think, for us, we always ask our students to be reflective. And I think we've had to realize, look, it's important for us to be reflective. It's important for us to be humble. It's important for us to, and we've had to do this through the pandemic, really draw upon the expertise of the entire university. We've made decisions about in-person instruction, about how we adapt our campus operating posture in open collaboration with the city, county public health, but also with faculty members here on our campus twice a week, meeting in large groups, saying we need to make sure a lot of voices and a lot of expertise are brought to bear. And it made our process and our plans for this year 1,000% better by having that level of engagement and asking questions about how we can do things better. So we got to take that forward.
All right, thank you so much. We have another question, and you all can chime in on this one. What do you think of vaccine passports as requirements for on-campus students, large music events, those types of things? I don't know if we're there yet, but if that were to come to pass, what do you think? Is that going to work?
Oh, well, I'll break the ice. I have not given that a great deal of thought. My first priority is, folks, just doggone it, get vaccinated. It's critical to do, and how that is recorded or used as a point of entry for certain events and such is a separate question I don't have a good answer for today, but getting vaccinated is absolutely key.
And that's really where our focus is here at the university too. I mean, again, our a huge thanks to our pharmacy team and our events team. And I mean, this is, you want to tireless defines what they've been doing, getting out there and getting vaccines and to as many arms as possible. And we've opened vaccinations not just to UM employees and their families, but also to all of our students. Our goal, in fact, I just spoke half an hour before this meeting. I was in a freshman biology 105 course, talking to all of them about the importance of getting those 2 doses, or in the case of Johnson & Johnson, 1 before they head out for the summer. And so we're really in that mode of encouraging the widest spread vaccination possible right now among our UM community. There are a lot of complexities involved with passports and requirements, and at this stage, our efforts are frankly have been focused on getting people through those clinics.
They're
Yes.
good. Oh.
Yeah, and we need to continue to get shots in arms for sure, and that continues to be our emphasis. If everyone is doing something different, that is a challenge, and that's been the challenge throughout this pandemic. So if there is a vaccine passport, I hope to hell that the federal government gets engaged in that, because I don't think it happens any other way.
Awesome. So talking about that, I was reading some article, Michigan, Florida, Minnesota, Massachusetts, they have huge surges with this UK variant. So as we talk about the future, are we getting ahead of ourselves? This is something we sort of need to look at because other states are now starting to have more and more sick folks. Are we still having to take it very careful as we move forward?
Yes.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And I think if it's related to the passport question, yeah, at the federal level, that is probably the appropriate level of government for such a notion to be implemented. But beyond that, yeah, we are not out of the woods yet by a long shot.
Yeah, and I think that, we're at the university. We have a coronavirus response team that still meets every single day. And they have public health, representatives from the city county public health on there. And we're excited and optimistic about the fall. Many of you have seen we're planning optimistically for full stadiums in the fall, for example. But many of you know that this past Saturday we had a game at Washington Grizzly Stadium, and frankly, public health guidelines would have allowed for a higher capacity in the stadium than we chose to take with this first go round. Because I think it's important that we manage through this. We take those incremental steps as vaccinations are increasing to ease back into what hopefully becomes soon a post-pandemic environment. Anyone else?
Gotcha.
Yes.
It's frustrating. People they're so sick of this. They're so tired of this, and it's so exciting, but then you got to take a look around at what's happening in the country. And there's this variant. I know Montana has had some, so here's hoping for the best, I guess. Here's an interesting question as we wrap up. We have about 7 minutes left. And they admit the question borders on the philosophical. Our speakers, all of you, when describing our life together in Missoula, use the expression quality of life more than once. Apart from our institutional and economic growth, how do we enhance our quality of life here and our relationships with one another, considering what we've just experienced in the last year?
Well, I occasionally hear from folks, if I could do anything, what would I do as mayor? And I would make sure that everyone had a clean, safe place to live, full belly, access to healthcare, access to education, and somebody in their life who loves them and cares about them. And through the pandemic, I think we've seen people maybe reaching out a little bit more to their friends and neighbors, being a little bit more compassionate, a little more caring, a little more selfless. And I think quality of life, in addition to the built environment and the programming and everything we do to, we hope, make lives easier for most Missoulians, we have to remember that there are folks for whom quality of life is largely dependent on the kindness and compassion of others. And it's been a tough year for lots of folks. And if we can just be a little more patient, a little more compassionate, a little more decent to one another, that can make all the difference in the world as well. All of the organizations that do the work of making lives whole for folks with limited resources, support those organizations. I can't imagine Missoula without Meals on Wheels or the Food Bank or the Powerello or the Salvation Army, or you name the countless organizations that provide support to families and individuals who just struggle. And if we can work collectively to temper those struggles, we lift each one of us up.
And maybe I'll jump in to give the last word to Commissioner Strohmaier. But, I talked about the university design team's work over the past year. And one of the things we worked a lot on with that group is how do we succinctly articulate the vision of this university. We have a mission statement, but the vision statement we talked a lot about and that they articulated was that the University of Montana will be a flagship for the future, fostering inclusive prosperity and democracy and creating new knowledge and ways of learning. And I really want to underscore those words, and John talks about this a lot: inclusive prosperity. Higher education has always been about that social contract here in this country, that everybody ought to have access to a high quality, affordable education that gives them a path to a better life. Social mobility being a key part of what we do, and that's what we're focused on here. Is not just those traditional aid students, but for people, not just from all walks of life, but at all stages of life, that are robust, high quality, to use John's word, robust. He said an MBA word, I'm just going to call it John's. But a high quality education that gives people those opportunities to reach their full potential. That's what we're focused on, and I think that leads to quality life in this community. For again, that's inclusive, and that's, I think, a key role of a public institution of higher education.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. For me, it boils down to an ethic of caring for one another, caring for our natural environment and the communities in which we live. The Clark Fork River is no longer an open dumping ground. It's an amenity and a piece of this community that we have embraced. We no longer have teepee burners polluting the air in the Missoula Valley. We've come a long ways, and that's part of quality of life. We're working on cleaning up the Smurfett Stone Superfund site. That's part of what it means to enhance the quality of life, and it also means giving each other the benefit of the doubt, remembering the golden rule, and really showing the love and respect to our fellow human beings in this community that they all deserve. So that's all part of what defines, for me, Missoula and Missoula County's quality of life.
Okay, in 10 seconds or less, quickly, when do you think we might be back to normal, if you had to predict? Mayor, go.
There is no normal.
Okay. Mr. Stromeier?
It's part of a process. We are moving along as quickly as we can, and this is maybe what you see is what you get for a while.
All right, Mr. Bodnar.
Well, some of you know I'm a baseball fan, and that great baseball philosopher Yogi Berra once said, "Predictions are hard to make, especially about the future." And we've definitely learned that with this pandemic. What I will say, the other side of this pandemic for us is a improved normal. it's a new and improved normal, and we're gonna work our way toward there incrementally. I don't think it's binary. I think this is an analog process.
Thank you. All right, Brett.
Commissioner Stromeier, President Bodnar, Mayor Engen, Jill Valley, thank you so much. I think we are very fortunate to have such capable and accessible leaders. Agree or disagree with them, they're always there for us, and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to our sponsors, particularly the University of Montana, First Security Bank, and Blackfoot Communications. And most importantly, thank you to our audience. We couldn't do this without you. Earlier in the forum today, Commissioner Stromeier mentioned some sort of food policy afoot in the county. Well, please join us next month. I think it's May 10th for our forum, which is entitled Sowing Local and Sustainable Food Systems in the Garden City. I think Commissioner Stromeier can predict the future, and he did so. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.